Joined now by Cap-Breton Eagles education coordinator Ryan MacPherson. I think fans are familiar with the name Ryan, but Ryan, tell us, how did you become the education coordinator of the Eagles?
A couple of years ago, when Marc-Andre Dumont was here, they were looking for a replacement for Gary McNeil, who stepped back, and I threw my name in the loop and was interviewed extensively, to get into that mix. And for the past 6 years, I've been in this job working with all the new parts of the organization the last couple of years.
Now, people that are aware of the ins and outs probably know you're a school teacher as well, but tell us, what are the day-to-day responsibilities of an education coordinator with the junior hockey club?
They kind of vary by year. Vary by year and vary by parts of the year. At the start of the year in August and in September, it's really intensive, busy, because we're trying to get the new pieces added in, the returning guys set up, and then kind of get started. Then it kind of lulls a bit, and then we kind of get into player management, I guess, up till the trade deadline. And then trade deadline, you kind of get a repeat of September, and then it lulls again. And then we generally have a little uptake in February, March, just before playoffs, to get guys kind of lined up before we jump into the playoffs. We get into playoffs, and then things kind of, get mixy there because we have travel and all the other thing that comes into effect. And then when the year's finished up, we have to transfer guys either back home to their home schools, or we try to finish off education before they go back. So it's kind of comes and flows.
Now, you have players in a variety of different school systems. I think off the top of my head, you have your local kids that are attending high school physically, same with the university, and then you probably have distance for both high school, university, and CJEP. Tell us, maybe, am I missing something there? What other means of education are there for the players?
That covers most of the North American guys. The Euros are often lost in translation, pardon the pun, but the Euros come, and most of our players come either to take English second language courses, or in the past number of years, it started with Leon Gavanke. Leon actually did his high school from Germany here while he was here. That was kind of the first ever time we've got into the German school system, and now Ivan takes his school from the Czech Republic.
Of course, you can't say a sentence these days without uttering the phrase COVID-19. So tell us how that's affected your job. I know we're still early going in the season here, but how are things different for you with everything that's going on with the pandemic?
They're different and they're the same. Our players they're student athletes. So our players are student athletes, so school and hockey is a balance. So we never want to leave the guys high and dry when it comes to school. So with all the dotes and ins and outs of the season, generally we plan for the returning guys coming into the year. This year we had to plan for all the guys coming to camp. So that was like 34 plus the 2 European players. So it was a busy start. So we had a lot of had a lot of balls in the air. So that was the first initial pathway. We also try to keep guys into a distance situation. So our CJEP guys are distance anyway. Our secondary level 5 guys, our high school guys out of Quebec, those are distance as well. We have some different players who are taking different systems out of Quebec, so they're distance as well. The only one right now is the public school system in Nova Scotia. We're sending those guys to school because that's what the direction is to do. But they're also kind of in a situation where they can work virtually in the class as well if need be. So most guys are distanced, and then trying to learn how to manage that has been probably the deeper challenge, because you used to be able to have meetings as a group. Now we have to have meetings in small groups, or you're relying on like Zoom or a Google Meet. So there's a little more responsibility put on the student athlete, but there's also more responsibility put on us as a team to make sure we manage those players correctly.
Now, as student athletes, they're obviously balancing life, whether it be playing or practice and whatnot, so they can't be in school all the time. How much of the decision about whether a player should be in school goes to you or goes to the coaching staff, or is that a matter of consulting when you're coming off a road trip? Should the guys go to school at 11, 10? How do those decisions get made?
Yeah, it depends. If you want it in a non-COVID year, we talk a lot. We talk a lot. We have a preset schedule from the start of the year that we get from Charles Grant, who handles most of our travel. So we look at that, we study it, and we say, okay, what days can we give off? Then intrinsically throughout the year, there's also things that come up.
We talked about Charles Grant, obviously a great asset to the organization the last couple of years, and one of the new coaches that came in last year was Matt Anthony, and an emphasis on education for Matt coming from Newbridge Academy, knowledge of French. Tell us what Matt's meant to the organization since coming in.
Matt, when we talk to parents, having the ability to say one of our assistant coaches who's on the road with the guys 24/7 is an actual teacher who has educational experience, helps put the cherry on the top of the sundae for a program. It allows us to, entrust somebody on the road full time with the guys have a question about school. And then the trip I usually make a year, usually to Quebec in February, the two of us can kind of work it together, and to see that on the road and see, like, just to the back of the bus, just trying to get those relationships with players worked out. it makes my life a little extra easier because I can make a call to the coaching staff pretty much anytime I need to, and Matt gets it to the player ASAP. And especially this year where restrictions are on, with paperwork and that kind of stuff, Matt's been handling a lot of those extra duties for me, so I really appreciate that this year.
Me and Ryan were roommates last year on that trip, had some fun. I'm going to miss going to Quebec this year, but it's obviously one of the necessary steps that needs to be taken for this coming season. Also, Ryan, you're a player billet in addition to being education coordinator, and I think a lot of times if you're holding a job like education coordinator, being a billet actually helps because you're able to see what the players are going through. How much does that help in your job day to day?
It helps. Sometimes it hinders too. It just depends on the situation and the player in your home. It's comforting in the fact that I get to see the players in a different environment, which is always comfortable. Getting to know the player as a holistic player, so like 360, allows me to kind of do things in school that maybe I wouldn't have done if I didn't know them outside of the building. So, they'll drop by the host, they'll talk, they'll see that, so they'll see me in a different environment too. So I think that's the piece that really does help. The players that are with me are very comfortable. We've been really fortunate over the years to have guys that were able to help me learn how a junior hockey player functions. So that's a big thing to know too, how that learns when to push, when to pull.
Now, having been with the team for a couple of years already, are there any success stories educationally that stand out to you in your time, and what have been some of the highlights as an education coordinator?
A couple, like a guy like Cap-Breton, who finished up in Baie-Comeau last year. Cap-Breton took everything in his life when it came to school extremely serious, competed on the ice and competed in the classroom every day, and is now moving on to post-secondary study with a lot of money and scholarship. And he's also going to be one of our league ambassadors for our online tutoring program called Paper. So Pruzy was a real kind of key piece. But, a lot of guys, too, that came in who started as, say, students who were challenging, and we were able to get them through and get them moved on to, post-secondary school to play hockey. Those are moments that, you don't forget. So when you get the text from those players to say, listen, I wouldn't be at university without what you did for me. So those are the moments where you're like, whew, I didn't expect to have that type of impact, but it's a nice tip, I guess, on top of everything we do.
Yeah, that's what we want to do here, really tell stories of everything that's going on in the organization and everything around the game, because there's a lot more to it than I think a lot of people realize. The last question I wanted to ask on education is, as a play-by-play guy, I almost feel like all the play-by-play announcers around the league are almost like our own team, same with the therapists. How much is that situation for the education coordinators? How much do you work together as a group with, say, Halifax's education coordinator, Moncton's, etc.?
We have like a small core group in Sydney. So like myself, Ely Blondin, Gary McLean, and Cameron Clark. So that's our core kind of education group here. But we talk all the time, especially with the maritime teams. So when COVID came in, the maritime teams used to get together a lot to kind of come up with best practices and what we were going to do. And also, what's not common is we often talk about Quebec as being an education system. We're also in Nova Scotia, PEI, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, so that's 4 different education systems in one area. So you also have to trade information back and forth from team to team because a team in New Brunswick might have more knowledge about the New Brunswick system than, say, Nova Scotia, and likewise, too. We trade back a lot of info when we can.
I couldn't have you on without asking about your daughter, Ella, who's captured the imagination of everybody around Cap-Breton. I know we probably have a lot of fans not from Cap-Breton watching, so without maybe going into all the details, tell us a little bit about Ella's story and how much the community support has meant to her and the family.
I guess this time last year, they were just moving back from Halifax. So for those who don't know, my daughter had a bone marrow transplant last year for a rare genetic bone disease. So we were at Sick Kids for 3 months in Toronto. Without the support of the community, we were talking about this just last week with some people. Without the support of the community, I don't know where we'd be. We're talking to the point where, there's points where our mortgage payments were paid because of money that was fundraised. So that kind of stuff changes people's lives. So we're lucky to have a now fairly independent, beats to her own drum 22-month-old at home, torturing her brother and doing everything she's supposed to do. Like I said, we're followed still pretty closely, but not as much. So it's actually nice to be a family at home, do your things. The pandemic, one of the positives of the pandemic was we got to actually have our parental leave. So we were home for 6 months together. So the time we didn't have together when we were in hospital and back and forth all the time, we got to have that during the lockdown. So that was a positive take out of that. And she's doing really well. She's home today, walking, and going to have a set of glasses next week. So it's all good.
Well, that's some of the best news I think we're going to hear all year. Great insight about everything in the education program, Ryan. Thanks for telling us all about it.
Thanks, Patty. Appreciate it.